Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Thrive Forward podcast. We are so grateful for you listening. And today, as we are continuing with our back to school theme for the month of August, as we round out the summer and enter into a new space that has been different, the educational aspect of our lives, whether we are parents or students or loved ones who are caregivers. We have experienced so many different things with education, and emotions and relationships have been affected by these transitions and changes to what our world looks like and what our everyday might look like and what this new space of going back to school might be. Not only that, we might have some individuals in our lives who might be leaving the nest for the first time, and lots of emotions that go with that as well. And so on today's podcast, we have licensed marriage and family therapist Ann Dillard. And Ann specializes in relationships with teens and their mothers. She herself had a relationship with her mom who may have been tumultuous. Ann is a thriver of many things in life and trauma that she has overcome to be able to use the resources that got her through to transcend and use those resources for generations to come, and is very humble in the aspect that we are all continuing to learn. Ann has 3 items for you to focus on in your relationships, especially going back to school, whether it be with your teenage daughter, as we're focusing in our conversation, or those that identify in that space, how to have those relationships with your children and cultivate them before they leave the nest. And even as they're exiting the nest and into adulthood, how do we have those continued relationships? One of the key pieces that I really love that Ann said was, do you want to be their critic, or do you want to be their inner champion and cheerleader? I know the answer for my relationship with my daughters is that I want to champion them, but I'm always looking to individuals like Ann to be able to provide guidance in how I can do that in an even better way. So if you know someone who is in relationship with their teenage child and looking for a way to expand and make that relationship even better, or maybe it's a relationship that needs some work, because we have those in our lives too, this is a great episode for you to tune into or even share with your community. So now tune in to the wonder that Ann Dillard is going to create for you. Miss Ann, thank you so much for joining us on the Thrive Forward podcast. I am truly excited to have you engage in these conversations around mother-daughter relationships. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Absolutely, Shannon. Thank you for having me. You know, this is what I love to talk about. I can talk about it in my sleep. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited about our mutual connection that got us connected. And so grateful for this opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your journey and how you got into this focus of practice with mother and daughters. We're heading into this back to school season, and I couldn't find it more of a great time to touch on such a critical element of this relationship. And you and I connected in that space as well, of having those maybe not so wonderful times, and then transcending that relationship into our lives now.
Right. That is exactly what it is. And, when we think about the mother-daughter relationship, a lot of times we always expect it to be this mushy, gushy, soft, cushy kind of thing, right? And a lot of times we fail to realize that there are challenges in the relationship, even though I love my mom, and other people might just love their mother, wouldn't trade her for the world. And we have challenges. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I really started to focus more on this work probably about 4 years ago, when I was invited to be a part of the anthology that's called Unchain My Legacy. And I think it was 12 of us African-American women were invited to write about what are things in our lives that we need to unchain so that we can create a better legacy or better future for our own children. Mm-hmm. And many of us in that anthology wrote about our mother-daughter relationship. So really, the journey for me started with me really looking at my relationship with my daughter. Mm-hmm. And then kind of making full circle to look at my relationship with my mother. And so whereas in the chapter that I wrote about, some of the challenges or even giving my daughter space to voice her opinion about what does she think about our relationship. And I didn't just come out and say, what did you think about our relationship? Was I a good mom? She might have felt pressure to say, yeah, mom. Yeah, right. You were. Right. But I started with kind of a side question that said, what do you wish you knew when you were 13?
Ooh, I love that way.
Yeah. And, she's like, no, I was good. But then giving her permission to say, well, I want you to really think about it. And it was amazing because she was able to put her hand right on her journal from when she was 13 years old. And I'm like, I didn't know I wanted you to think that deeply, but she did. And she was able to share some things about what she knew, what she wished she had known, and how things really were according to her perspective. And that was life-changing for me because I think it was life-changing for us because now she could, finally own her voice, own her space. But as a mom, hearing some of those hard things, realizing that, oh my gosh, some of those things happen on my watch. I caused some of those things, right? And then how do I then navigate this or even feel like I am a good mom and that space, it's a hard space to hold.
It is, and necessary.
So
that we can explore without shaming ourselves that it is, that we don't have to live in this motherhood of perfection, right?
Right. Oh, that's so true. And that's a hard place for mothers to be. It's like, it's either or. And it doesn't have to be either or. Right. It can be, I am a good mom, but guess what? I made some huge messes or I made some mistakes as I was navigating motherhood. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it depends on, like you said, looking at the relationship with your daughter then allowed you to examine the relationship with your mother and what generational things you might have taken on. And through your process of unchaining and writing, we're right. able to, start to process some of those things. I think we don't necessarily ever get over them. We just know how to process them differently. What were some of those learnings for you with exploring that space?
That is so amazing that you asked that because the things that my daughter was saying were things that I had experienced myself where, I didn't necessarily have a voice or felt like I had a voice in my household. And what I realized was that I was so busy making sure or paying attention to certain monumental things that I did not want to happen to my daughter under my watch that I missed some of the other critical things. I was laser focused on, this is not going to happen to you. We're not going to have sleepovers. We're not going to do this. We're not, trying to prevent some of those things instead of a balanced approach or even an open conversational approach. And I missed some of those things. And we repeat what we don't repair. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when stressors come, we really divert or we gravitate to what's common to us when we're in stressful situations.
Well, and when we talk about our relationships of growing up, I love that you say we repeat what we don't repair. So for me, I grew up in a household where we yelled. There was a lot of yelling. We're very passionate individuals. I laugh because we're not Italian, but we're like a very boisterous family. I did do my DNA and I had like less than 0.5% of Italian descent. And I was like, oh, that's where it's coming from.
Right?
No, I'm kidding. But we were very, especially my dad and I mean, very passionate, and I had told my husband, I don't necessarily want to be a yelling mom. I failed at that miserably. Because I never really dealt with some of those perfection. The yelling actually happened from a level of frustration, from a level of trying to achieve this perfect mom isms. When I was pregnant with my girls, Pinterest was at its like all-time high of like active momming. Like you looked up everything on Pinterest, birthday parties, birthing, all of the things, baby showers, all of the parties. And then there was this element of having to fit into this perfectly filtered world where like, if you didn't have everything together, like what people won't see in this podcast is I have sneakers and gym shorts on underneath. Top half looks great. Bottom half is super comfy, right? But it's that level of perfectionism that I hadn't dealt with early on and still struggled to deal with, because I think we live in this society. And you and I talked a little bit about this in our pre-conversation to recording, that my mother had a mother of perfectionism and was in the limelight. And so then that transcended to her. And it was, you don't mess up. Like right. You have to have this shiny outside so that nobody else sees the icky stuff that they might judge you for.
Right. And isn't that such a, that is such a monumental thing that has impacted our parenting so much based on, and when we think about judgment, and by the way, I'm in the process of writing a book about adult daughters navigating their relationship with their judgmental mothers, right? And when we think about judgment, it's 99% of it is based on what we think other people might think. Right. So I'm going to judge you because of how you styled your hair or the clothes you have on, because God forbid somebody would see you and think that I'm not a good mom for letting you leave the house looking like that. Mm-hmm. Right. And so while I'm doing this research and thinking about, what is judgment formed on? What's the core of judgment and having a judgmental relationship? And it's usually because, one, we lack self-confidence and individuality. And two, we want to fit in. We want to belong. And God forbid somebody would not think that you're being a good mom because of how your child represents outside.
Yeah. And I love my mom. I love everything about her. And right, that critical and word. And that was something that I took on from her and have tried in my adult parenting to give her permission to, hey, Mom, you don't have to do that. She used to, when her sister came to town, she would like scramble to like make sure the house looked absolutely perfect. And I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? Let her see that you're actually, struggling to take care of your dad and raise me and take care of, the household. Like, let her see that. Don't let her see that everything's perfect, because then she's not going to help you with anything. She doesn't think you have it all together. You don't need any help. And allowing that permission, you and I had talked about some of that healing relationship with our own moms, like being able to identify what their experiences had been, to allow them that space to say, oh, that might be why I was parented that way, or that might be why that relationship transcended in that space. What do you see most frequently with the work that you do? And maybe share a little bit about the work that you do with mothers and daughters and why it's so critical.
That is such a critical work, because the mother-daughter relationship is the most intense, the most lasting intergenerational relationship across our lifespan, right? Whether or not your mother is alive, she still influences your life. Wherever you are on that journey, that is, again, one of the most critical relationship that you'll have. And so a lot of times what I find, and I work primarily with teens and their moms, and I've gotten quite a group of young adults. They're emerging adults, and they're finally able to say, you know what, I want to hone my individuality, but I'm kind of trapped in trying to please my mom, and I want my voice. I want to separate my voice. So that creates the conflict and the tension in their relationship. So I'm getting a really large group of that population of young adult women as well. And so looking at that relationship, one of the things that I've learned that is so important is that more than anything, I find that the women that I work with, they're looking for the approval and the validation of their mothers. Yeah. Doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter if they're mothers themselves. It's like, oh, if I could just get that approval from my mom, that means everything to me.
Mm. Mm. I think that that's a good thing for some moms to hear, right? Is that struggle of individualism and coming into our own and being the people that we were designed to be, yet sometimes feeling held back. What are the things that you work with moms on to understand? So we're going into the school year. Our teenagers are coming up, or young adults are coming off of a really hard year. Being away from their friends, social unrest. We know our next generation has been a critical key part to some of the transformation that our culture has seen in the last year. How do we support them in these spaces? What's the best way for moms to kind of start these conversations in an open, free space with their daughters?
Yeah, I think about, when we're going, well, it's not post-pandemic yet, right? But we're transitioning. I think just really, really paying attention to the mental health of your daughters is really important, right? One of the questions that I ask my teens is, what do you wish adults knew about the struggles teens are having navigating the pandemic? And sometimes as mothers or as parents, we can get so caught up in what we're doing, caught up in providing, caught up in doing our parenting, that we forget to attend to the mental health needs of our children. And knowing also that because things are beginning to open up, it doesn't mean that our children are well per se. They, like you stated, they've gone through just the most excruciating experiences, a lot of isolations, a lot of cancellations of transitional or kind of milestone events, right? And so that has taken a toll mentally. And so not expecting your teen to just bounce back is really important, paying attention, because some of the things, there might even be a delay in the manifestation of how they've been impacted during this pandemic, right? When your brain is in survival mode, you kind of just go, go, go. And then what I'm noticing is like, oh my goodness, we just went through that. And so the brain is trying to process now, what was that? How do I make sense of the world now? And, is it safe to go out? What do I do with people who don't want to wear a mask? Or, can I still wear a mask even though the governors have lifted the ban, right? What can I do? How can I feel safe again in this world?
Yeah. I mean, I've even seen that with my little people. We went up north for a vacation in northern Minnesota. Nobody wears a mask up there.
Nobody wears.
It's okay. I get it. Like the population is small or whatever. I'm not trying to offend anybody. But at the same time, we live in the city where my kids for the last 18 months have worn a mask every single place that they've been. And, I could see with my youngest daughter, Mom, am I safe? Is this okay? Their little brains are developing, and, my people are 6 and 8. So I say little brains because they're little people, but their brains are still developing. Even as a teenager, we know that there is not a lot of critical brain development until like our early 20s to mid 20s for some people, right? I feel like you tell me, you're the professional.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
Maybe regurgitating data I heard from somebody else.
No, you're right on. You are right on. And again, people develop at different stages, but there's a lot going on, right? And wanting to feel safe. And how do we redefine safety when we're coming off of 18 months of uncertainties?
Yeah, absolutely. Uncertainties, not only from like a physical health being, a mental and emotional, especially when we talk about our youth who have been impacted in social elements. The impact is, I volunteer as a board of directors for an inner city nonprofit called Urban Ventures in South Minneapolis. Nice. And I had the pleasure of reading scholarship applications for our Act 6 full ride scholarship program. And every single applicant I read an application for was struggling with their mental health. Yeah. Every single one of those children. And I read 65 applications, and I had a fifth of the applications that kids applied for. So it is a real topic right now. I think even for adults, mental health is a real topic right now. That's why we address it on the podcast so frequently. And a lot of times people ask me, Shannon, why are you talking about relationships and mental health on a podcast? You're a financial advisor. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And it makes complete sense because a lot of our behavioral things that we take on in our lives pass from generation to generation. They pass because of our emotional and our mental well-beings. And if we have a supportive environment, we are more likely to be financially successful because of the environments that we've grown up in.
That's right. So true. So true. So I think that, if the one thing I would say is for parents to pay attention because, when we talk about let's get things back to normal, there is no getting back to normal. Let's try as a family to reestablish new norms by which we're going to operate and listen to your teens, listen to them.
Well, and I also, I had this conversation with the previous other podcast guest that joins us as we talk about like those parents who are leaving or having children leave the nest for the first time, but also thinking about it from the aspect of, making sure that we understand what's happening to us in that situation and what are some like things that we can do on the prepare side, not just the react side, and that life will look different. Like you said, it won't look the same, that we don't have to do the rat race, run. Instead, how do we redevelop a new relationship or the new normal, as I kind of have started to talk about it. Not that I coined that term because I'm not taking credit for that either. But what are some, like, if you had to take 3 takeaways for parents, whether they're going through a transition with their teens or going into a new empty nest scenario, what are some takeaways that you would have as things to create that new normal or watch for some of those things from a mental health perspective as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to send our attention to. I think it's really important as parents that we take care of our own mental health and well-being, right? Because we are models, and our children are watching us more about what we do than what we say, right? So if they see us glued to social media or electronics, and if they see us sleeping with that in our beds, they are learning from us, right? How to navigate the space. So the more that we are learning our own selves as parents to navigate this, take care of our own mental health, practice, our core values. That's really, really important to have that discussion with our children about what are our core values and what are our values as a family. Right? What values do we stand on as a family? I know for my family of creation, our core values are around spirituality, our faith. Our core values are around education as well, and strong family connection. Those are some of the core values that we operate by as a family. So that then becomes a compass for when your children leave, or if they're not leaving, but going back out in the world and the decisions that they're making. So having those conversations and really checking in. I think about my clientele who the children are leaving for, or young people are leaving for the first time to go to college. And one of the things I try to do to help my moms get prepared is to say, you know what, around, come about 4 weeks before, 6 weeks before, you might notice an increase in arguing. And it's not uncommon that separation anxiety starts that early. So just think about that and try not to take things personal, but instead of pulling away and saying things like, I can't wait for you to get out of here. I can't wait for you to leave. I can't wait, right? And, the teens might say, I can't wait to get out of here. I can't wait to leave. And hurting each other, lean in, create opportunities to lean in towards each other a little more because you're feeling the push. And everybody's on edge because we're on the brink of a transition. So just know that that's what's happening. It's not personal. This is a part of the circle of life, and try to create events, opportunities, activities that allows you to connect.
I think that's a beautiful space. I love the values part that you talked about. And I think even those young adults or children that you have in the home, helping them be a part of that and developing that, right? Because I'm sure they take more ownership if they're involved in the conversation rather than being told, right?
Absolutely.
Do you see that helps with them develop their individuality too when they get to be a part of those things?
I believe so. It makes for a stronger identity development in our children. It helps the parents too, because it's important that parents also know that while they are your children, they're not really here to carry out your wishes or your unmet dreams or your dreams that are deferred or denied. They are their individual selves. And so while you have your own core values, they might have core values that complement your values, and some of them might contradict. But if we have like family values that we operate by, that everybody had an input in, and when the kids are younger, 2, 3, of course they don't know what values, right? To what values are per se, but having that input is so important. And I think it gives great buy-in. And I'm not going to be there with you, but I know that your values will lead you.
Yeah. And that just like creating that solid foundation of core values will help from, maybe when you're dealing with that anxiety of transition and moving out of the house, you come back to those spaces of like, what were the things that you both found valuable and how can you find some quality time doing those things? For my daughter, she is a lover of quality time and physical touch. I know it. I mean, she is the one that wants to kiss me on the lips and love me up and like touch me and tackle me. And And then she wants me to be right there. Like, are you looking at me? Are you making sure you have eye contact? I see you, mom. Are you paying attention? And I don't think those things ever change, right? They just adapt into bigger parts of our personality. And sometimes remembering who they were as littles and what they might need too.
I think that's really key, and knowing who they are individually. Mm-hmm. That's really, really important. And one of the things that I have my mothers of teens to do is to imagine the relationship that you want to have with that teen when she is 26 years old. And I usually use 26. I don't know. That's just a good age for me, right? So what kind of relationship do you want with her when she's 26? And it doesn't just happen when she gets out of college, right? You have to start now to build on her individuality. You have to start building and respecting. And you just talked about the love languages, understanding who she is as an individual and what you want for her. Also thinking about what is the voice that you want to lead her, because our mothers' voices in a lot of instances become a guide in our the things that we hear. So they can be like our inner critic or our inner champion, our inner cheerleader. So what is that voice that you want to be in her head when she's 26? Do you want to be her critic, her champion, cheerleader? And so you have to really start that work early to develop that kind of relationship.
I think that's so beautiful. It's that transcending from generation to generation. That's such a critical question. Do you want to be their critic or their champion? I know I want to be their champion.
Right. But we can't wait till they're 25 to become their champion, right? No. We have to start, facing those generational barriers even, right? One of the generational barriers that I have to face is children are seen and not heard. You don't necessarily have a voice, but then do I automatically say, okay, upon graduation from college, you can now be heard?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we want our children to be able to stand up to somebody outside of our homes, if we want them to say no to things that are not aligned with our core values, our family's core values, then they have to be able to challenge us in certain ways and say no to us, and learn to build those not barriers, but boundaries with us.
Yes, it's so key. So I feel like I hear kind of these like three pieces from you of being able to listen and understand their individuality and embrace that through the multiple levels of relationship that you have with your child, and allowing them to have some space and say in what that looks like for them. And creating that space for them to be able to be seen and heard, right?
And
not
heard.
Just seen, but heard.
Yeah.
And then being able to start early in those relationships and not wait. Although it's never too late, right? You can still mend those relationships. Right. If they're headed out the door, how do you correct that? How do you look at, maybe I need to look at things differently. I always say when I mess up, mommy shouldn't have said it that way. I'm really sorry. This is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And admitting that I had messed up and that I didn't do it. Because this is my first time momming. Never mommed. I don't know about you, but I didn't get a how-to book.
Exactly. And that's critical, right? Because what I heard you say is taking accountability, taking responsibility for your actions, and being vulnerable enough to say, I'm not perfect. I don't have this thing down. So that takes a lot of courage to be able to do that. And those are, I think, are cornerstones to having a healthy relationship, whether you're starting at 3 or whether you're starting at 30. Being able to, take accountability, be accountable for your actions is really important.
That's just wonderful. Are there any other nuggets of knowledge that you would like to leave our audience with today as they transform into getting ready for school, no matter where they are in their motherhood or journey with their daughters or sons? Yeah. But we're focusing on the daughter relationship today.
Yeah, I just say above all, give yourself grace, give your daughters grace, a lot of it, right? Because that will always, for me, I see grace as always it's like the door to connection. Right? It doesn't mean you don't have discipline. It doesn't mean you don't have rules, but offering grace is so important to say, you know what you did was sucky and you probably should be grounded for life. And I understand that you're human, right? So how can we work through this? And I've always been transparent about my parenting. I wish that's one of the big wishes that I have, is that I was able to parent more from a grace-based standpoint.
I love that. It's almost like a definition of being human too, is to be able to provide all of us grace.
All of us, including yourself. That's the biggest part.
Miss Ann, where can people hang out with you and find out more about or collect any resources that you have? Because I know you have an abundance of those as well.
Oh, thank you for asking. I am on social media platforms as Ann Dillard, and Ann is just ANN, no E, Dillard, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. And also I have a Facebook group. It's called Building Authentic Mother-Daughter Relationships. And that is where you can have the greatest access to me. Unless you want to become one of my clients, you have more access to me. But I share tons of resources in my Facebook group, and I have a PayHip store where you can find resources that I've created to heal the mother-daughter relationship and also to build connections with teens. And that's just payhip.com/healthy conversations. And my website is www.andillard.com.
Well, we will include all of those links in the show notes and on anything that we put on our website as well, so people can have the great resources. And I know that you're writing this other book on this other critical upward relationship with mothers. So I can't wait for that. And we'll have to have you back on to talk about that topic. So critical Absolutely. Too. Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It is so important.